Hey everybody, so thank you so much for everybody and all the nice comments I've gotten. This is part 3 of the Native Born series 9 through 13. It was a really exciting journey for me to do the Native series, and this particular one on the morning run, it was inspired by a bicycle ride in Big Fork, Montana, not far at all from where I grew up in Whitefish, Montana. And what I wanted to do is create this challenging perspective from atop a cliff. And so where the horses were running down the river, and the trees were coming in and the sunlight was looking through the trees, and it was a very hard challenge to be able to create everything from that particular perspective in a 2 and 3D space, but I think I achieved what I was looking for. What was the biggest challenge was creating, since it's an interior approach from the air or from the side of the cliff adjacent to the where the horses were running, was the teepees. So I just ended up creating those rays, dampening the color a little bit, bumping up the cliff to the back of the teepee, and I think I achieved on the final illustration what I wanted to do. Now the next one, Wrong Way, it was inspired by a photograph a friend of mine took in Ronan, Montana as he was heading back to Anaconda, about 3 or 4 hours from where I grew up. And anyway, so in this particular illustration, I wanted to capture in the very back space, I wanted to capture a bunch of teepees that were vacant because the warrior Indians were actually out on a hunt. And there was aspen trees behind the teepees, and then the broken fallen trees, and then the little creek river system that you see. And of course, in the field where the 2 buffalo are, one is laying down and one is standing, hence the name Wrong Way, because the reality is when the warriors come back, even though it's a very unique spot, it's a earth geyser, Geo Thermal geyser that's radiating steam from earth. It's a beautiful area, it's a beautiful space, it's just too good to be true, and so that's why I called it Wrong Way. So it was a good use of both horizontal and vertical placement of elements, and what I mean by that is I had to create steam and shadowing and then a tree in the front and rock, and in the final illustration of Wrong Way, I think I captured all the emotion and energy I wanted to in its placement. And then at the very end, I was still thinking, I got to have more contrast in the back of the teepees because in this one, there were no mountains. In the final illustration, that's what I hope I did. Okay, here's number 11 of 13, Glacial Skies. It was inspired by 3 different parts of Montana on a weekend trip that I did in Butte, Montana. So in this particular painting, what I ended up doing was using the Mission Mountains, took a photograph and I used it as a reference of the Mission Mountains to create the actual 3D space in the very background. And in the middle ground was colors I got from Flathead Lake coming back from Anaconda, Montana. And in the foreground, the actual, it was a frontage road from Anaconda, Montana to Deer Lodge, Montana, and I noticed along these different river systems and these creek systems along the road of this frontage system were these amazing little bushes. So that's what the colors came from. And so there was a eagle, as you can see I'm drawing in there right now, and then the teepee that came in, and it was an apex predator. It was the first eagle I'd ever drawn, and I wanted it to create symmetrical sense inside the scene itself, between teepee, foreground, land, water, and the tree it was flying off of. So hopefully I achieved that. I think I did. And this one, like I said, is called Glacial Skies. In the final illustration, I was really happy with that one. So, here's an interesting one. This is called Dinner Party. Now, in Dinner Party, a friend of mine went up into Glacier National Park and he took a photograph of Bearcat Mountain. And so what I was trying to do here was, and I went through several different attempts to draw the mountain itself in its glacial rock form, which is mostly horizontal rock, and with snow, and I just couldn't leave it alone. I just tried all kinds of different iterations. I added a little bit more tree at the base of the mountain of Bearcat Mountain than what is actually real up in the park right now. And in the foreground, the foreground, the trees and the different type of elements I used were pretty accurate tonally in terms of how it actually does look up in Glacier National Park, about 25 miles where I grew up in Whitefish, Montana. So now, of course, I have bear grass and I have Indian paintbrush as far as the purple and the whites in the grass structure in the ground where the teepees are, and the elk that's going to be forming here in just a second and standing to the left. Now, when I finished almost the entire illustration of Dinner Party, I realized it was just a little too light, so I had to darken it to make the contrast of the 3 teepees and also the fire that was going on, and the warriors were on a little sightseeing tour. And so the reason I call it Dinner Party is either the elk's going to be dinner in the final illustration, or the actual elk is going to be able to get some of the food from the warriors that they left until they get back. So that's the way that went. Now, here we have 13 of 13, which was the final illustration of the Native Born gallery and series, and it is called Abandoned Camp, a fitting name just because it's one of those names that you choose when you're kind of, I guess, ending a series and you want it to be, you know, relevant. So in this, I actually had a whole bunch of different rock ideas in terms of how I was going to paint the mountain, and then how I wanted to have the middle ground of the trees that are changing, which now we're in September here in Montana, and so the trees are starting to change. And then I wanted the fog, and of course these beautiful sunsets we get both in late summer and fall. And I just couldn't leave the rock structure alone as it related to the background of the actual, of the mountain, just because I was like not painting obviously trees on that mountain. And so what I ended up doing is just forgetting about it for a while and putting the teepees in the center of the scene without a river. Now, there was only 2, or a creek or lake. There was only 2 illustrations out of 13 that I did that in. Then, so I put in the teepees. I put in some sticks that the American Indian warriors would hang their pelts on, and then broken trees to create some nice foreground in the first D space. And in the background, right before the actual main tree line, I also put some of those trees right before they die. They turn that beautiful gray. And so I just, like I said, I went back to the mountain and I couldn't leave it alone. So I added another mountain. So I went through so many different iterations in the final illustration. So thanks a lot, Native Born, 13 through 13, 1 through 13. MikeCpotter.com is my website, and I really appreciate all the warm comments. Hey there, everybody. So this is exactly where I stayed from August 2015 until April 2016. So I made it through a fall and a winter of Montana. Enjoy the little bit of the aerial video I did today of the teepee location, and really what was the main inspiration behind the Native Born series. As I finish out Part 3, Native Born, 9 through 13. Enjoy.